We had, as our school building, an older home, you would say an old home now, and it was clapboard. It was 2 stories. It was not fancy, and the classes were apportioned. Then the classes were small. My graduation class, I think, was 13. So the classes were quite small to begin with. There was a lot of discipline, and you were expected to, you conform. You were not expected to go off and do your own thing, you know. We didn't have a uniform at that time. That seems strange now. All of our children wore uniforms, but I mean, I did not have a uniform at school. We were married here. This had always been my parish, and so we came here for instruction. We were married, but Warren's best friend was in the seminary and had become a priest, and he invited him down to do the ceremony with us.
Well, I graduated in 1959, which was a long time ago, and so my memories of St. Anne's are actually very good. I remember the names of all of my teachers. I had some great sisters who taught me in every grade but the 3rd grade and the 7th grade. We used to play out on what is now, I guess, just the parking lot, and that was our field. And I told Father Graham the other day that we used to play something called mall ball. It's where all the boys would get together, and we'd have these little bitty rubber footballs, and we'd throw one up in the air, and whoever got the ball had to stay away from everybody else or they'd get mauled. I remember my 1st grade teacher, and she was a very sweet lady, and she was a nun, and she was a little short nun, and I used to think she was so mature, but I bet she wasn't over 22 years old at the time that she was teaching me. And they were very strict, but they were very loving to us as well. There were. My third grade lay teacher was Mrs. Walsh, and she had been, it seems to me, an institution at St. Anne's. And then Mrs. Davies was my seventh grade lay teacher, and she was stern and strict, probably sterner than any of the sisters that I had. But Benlin tells a story about Sister Joan Marie playing football with the boys, and she had her bonnet knocked off. And everybody stopped in amazement because nobody had ever seen a nun without her bonnet on. And Sister Joan Marie just laughed and chuckled and picked it up and put it back on her head, and they went on and played more football together. Well, the lunchroom was the old church. It was a white clapboard building that had been the church before it was down in the basement. Now it's no longer in the basement. St. Anne's has got a beautiful church now. But it was just a wooden clapboard building, and we'd go through the lunch line. And I was talking with Benlin about it tonight, how I remember they gave us plates that had Roy Rogers and Trigger on them. And Sister Catherine Ann said, well, if you eat everything on your plate, you'll be able to see Roy Rogers and Trigger. And so we did. We ate all our lunches so we could see the pictures of Roy Rogers and Trigger at the bottom of the plate.
I'm Father John MacArthur, and I'm celebrating my 50th anniversary of graduation from St. Anne, 1962, and had a wonderful experience there. It's really a family environment that I have great memories of ball games and sisters and priests and classmates and just family atmosphere, and being able to have the new church that is now 50 years old to be open when I was in the 8th grade. Still think it's one of the most beautiful churches in Memphis. And ironically, 12 years later, after I graduated, I became ordained a priest, and my very first assignment was at St. Anne. And it was very wonderful to be home, but also very awkward to be preaching to parents of my classmates who saw me as a little boy not far long before that. So it was kind of intimidating, and but yet really a challenge and a great joy to be there, and that's why I love St. Anne's. Well, I remember Sister Mary Georgiana, my first grade teacher, because I have a great memory. We had a half day in those days, and she was there, and I was intimidated by the habits. And my mother and aunt, who came to the Mass to just kind of check, make sure I was doing all right, they noticed that I leaned over and talked to Sister during the Mass, and later they had to ask her, what was he saying? She said, well, I've been with you long enough. I want to go back with my mother now. So. And she got a kick out of that. But I remember Mr. Charles, who's Mr. Charles Looney, teaching the 7th grade, Sister Mary Rayfield, Miss Buckadany, Miss Mary was her name. Miss Dislin was probably my favorite teacher. I think I had a little crush on her in the 3rd grade. I played every sport there at the time. Baseball was my favorite, and football and basketball, and played on a lot of baseball teams. We got very close to some championships. I never quite made it over the finish line, but that's I loved, my passion was, and still love baseball. I still watch it. Played basketball. Football was my next favorite, but basketball, we didn't have a gym at St. Anne, and we probably had 600 to 700 children there at the school. We had to go downtown to the old Catholic Club, or down to Messick, or to Davis Park Community Center, to wherever we could find a place to practice, because we didn't have a gym. Well, I probably the seed of my becoming a priest maybe was because of religion. I took it like anything else, just casually, and in the 6th grade, our teacher, Sister Joan Marie, told us that in the front of the Baltimore Catechism, all those prayers we'd have to know, and so I didn't pay attention to her. So the next day, she started going down the row and said, whoever can say the Our Father, your first person, and if they didn't know it, they had to stay after school and write it 5 times. When it got to me, it was the act of hope, and I had to write it 55 times. So I started taking religion real seriously after that, and my classmates would often say, help us with religion. So maybe that was my favorite. I love geography and history because I still have an interest in all of that, but religion probably was my favorite because of, first of all, fear, I guess, but it also kind of gave me the seed to what I'm doing today.
The sisters, they rocked. At recess, they would be out there with us playing kickball or softball. They became a child. It was fun here and there. The rosary, running the bases, hearing those rosary beats clang together. And then stopping sometimes at noon. I can remember when the Angelus would ring, and we would say the Angelus. Then we'd start that game back up again. Then it was time to line up to go back in those halls, and as soon as you're back in the halls, you knew who the boss was. The boys always got the field for whatever reason, and the girls had to play on the blacktop. The boys played football, we played kickball, and we played, if you remember the show, Man from U.N.C.L.E., we played that. Nowadays, I see they've got it's a beautiful gym here, and that's great. Back when I was going to school here, we didn't have a gym. All the sports were played. We were never a home team. We would go to St. John's to practice. We would walk down the street to Davis Park and practice, or we would go over to St. Michael's and practice. Sister Mary Placide, oh my goodness, she was 2nd grade teacher. She was the first one, she was probably, well, the first one to keep me after school for talking. And sister, I'm still talking. But I think she put the fear of God in me about, not behaving well in class, getting in trouble for talking. Yes, I had Miss Ward. She was our 4th grade teacher. She was a wonderful teacher too. She was very strict. I remember her teaching us the times tables, and I also remember her teaching. We had exercise class and things like that. She lived here, just a couple of doors down. And piano recitals. Ms. Veely. Everyone loved Ms. Veely. And our yearly piano recitals in Father Neenan Hall. That was a nerve-wracking time. It was a fun time to get dressed up with your pretty dress with all the scratchy petticoats underneath. But that was a fun time.
13 people in the class. Another kind of interesting thing about it, there are 13 people, 10 boys, 3 girls. So we're a great majority boys. So we had enough for a basketball team. You know, we had enough for the sports team. But so we had a class actually in a little small room. In our 8th grade class was behind the cafeteria. There's a little small room in between the kitchen and the stairwell, and we had our 8th grade classroom in there. The teachers at that time, we had 3 teachers for 8th grade. It was Sister Janine, Mrs. Brown, and Mrs. Snyder, and they would come down. They had to come from the top floor down to our classroom. We just stayed there. They came to us. I was involved in sports at St. Anne's. If there were so few of us that we kind of had to be. We didn't have a football team. I remember one year St. John's asked us if we could combine a team, and I think some guys did. We definitely had a basketball team, but we didn't have a gym. So our home games were at St. John's gym. We would practice in 7th and 8th grade. We used to practice at the community center at Davis Park. So I remember doing many practices at Davis Community Center, Davis Park. Yeah, we had all grades there, and the school was so unique and small that we knew everyone. I knew everyone from kindergarten to 8th grade. You know, there were a lot of great families there. In my beginning days, there was a Clements family. They had a bunch of kids, so everyone knew the Clements. The O'Briens, which everyone knows, they seem to have a kid in every grade. Jennifer O'Brien and I were really close. She was a year behind me, and there was Sister Madeline, Sister Bernadine, and everyone, you know, kind of feared their wrath. So you definitely didn't want to get sent to the principal's office or Sister Bernadine with her dreaded finger kind of waving you over to her. You definitely didn't want to get that. But in general, everyone was pretty good. I had some great friends, and you know, if you hung around the right people, you never got in trouble. I wasn't the kind of kid that got in a lot of trouble.